Let's take a breath together. Before I get started, let me use my privilege just a moment and say good morning to my mama, who's joining us on Facebook. Easter Sunday. Was having a conversation with a practitioner earlier this week about there's some level of amusement that happens for us because science of mind technically has no spiritual holidays, has no religious holidays. And yet, clearly we do. Which, if we think about our tradition embracing all other traditions, then it begins to make sense to me. So this morning, we're going to talk about the resurrection. But we're going to talk about it from a very different paradigm than I've ever talked about it before. I have a gentleman in the room that has been co-facilitating with a group of us, with the Reverend Dr. Deborah L. Johnson from Santa Cruz, the founder of Inner Light Ministries, has brought forward a brilliant work on how to get off the villain-victim-hero triangle, because it really, that activity really does seem to be at the very core of our idea of separation. And the only thing that ever really needs to be healed is the delusion that we're separate. And that shows up in society as othering each other. And in order to other one another, we have to have a villain. We have to have a victim. And then many of us who find ourselves in some aspect of a helping profession don the cape and become the heroes. What I want you to really get before I get too deep into this, it's all delusional. Those roles are all made up. And when I think about this whole time of the year, the trial of Jesus, what led to the trial of Jesus, the crucifixion, the mob that demanded his crucifixion, even though he was legitimately innocent of all charges brought against him, and that they violated their own court proceedings in order to turn him over to a mob to quash a social uprising. Nothing like today. No parallels in any of this, right? There was a whole system of villains, victims, and heroes going on there. And this whole idea of oneness, I've wrestled with this for weeks now with this talk coming up. It's like, how do I talk about this human being who happened to be named Jesus, and the life of this human being, which may or may not have rolled out the way it's been written? You know, the bottom line is, all that we have in writing is writing. And we all write for the reader. And it may or may not have some degree of creative license in the storytelling. I'm just saying, I wasn't there. And so to speak with any level of authority about the accuracy of those writings, I can't do that. I wasn't there. But I can read with a discerning mind. I can read with the mind that I believe this whole story is calling us to resurrect. First being, stop defending. Stop defending who you are. Stop defending how you show up in life. At Jesus' trial, never once did he defend himself. Never once did he justify himself. All he ever said when, leveling all of these charges against him, the only thing he ever said, reportedly, your words. Your words. He didn't deny it. He didn't validate it. He simply handed it back to the people that were saying it. Your words. That's what you say I am. That's what you say. Now, for me, there is a clear correlation of the creative process. Because if I tell myself who you are, I am going to react and respond to you as if you're that, whether you are or not. Isn't that the same thing we do with othering people? We don't take the time to have a conversation, to get to know the person. We just take usually a behavior, slap it on another human being as an identity, and then begin to treat them like it's true every moment of their life. Now, I don't know about you, but I got some behaviors in my past that I would really appreciate you not doing that with. I'm just saying. Right? My favorite example is lying. Now, if you've studied child development at all, lying is actually a healthy part of child development. It's a necessary part of how we grow up here on planet Earth. And yet, despite the healthy nature of the activity, if somebody tells a lie, rather than what's accurate is, that's a human being that told a lie, that's not what we say. You become a liar. Now that's your identity. Go forth and prosper. Not. Right? How do we ever get to a resurrection? Because our true identity, be very clear. If I am sure of nothing else in this human realm, I am certain in every fiber of my being of this. Our true identity is that we are an intentional, on purpose, one of a kind, never to be repeated, divine idea in the mind of whatever this infinite being is to know and experience its life as us, individualized. That's your identity. All this other stuff is just stuff. It's behaviors that we've assigned identities to. And we do it all over the place. Right? Our sexual orientation. Listen, sexual orientation. Not sexual identity. It is not who somebody is. It's how they're oriented sexually in this human realm. It's not your identity. Being transgender is not my identity. It's a descriptor of one of the ways I identify, but it is not my identity. Heterosexual, not your identity. Homosexual, not your identity. White, black, not your identity. Asian, Indian, not your identity. They are descriptors of aspects of what we are in this human realm. And nowhere in there is there a reason or a basis to polarize and other one another. When was the last time you walked out into your flower bed and praised the roses and scolded the lilies? When? When was the last time while you're mowing the grass, you went around certain types of grass because they're unworthy of being mowed? Never. Because we only do it with each other. And why is that? I don't know. I could make up a lot of theories and I could make them sound really good. But the truth is, I don't know. We could say it's because we have an ego, but if we understand ego in terms of metaphysics, ego is simply referring to the divine in human form. Now, there's nothing in that. We go to the psychology of ego, and we've got different things because it feels to me like we're really sloppy and lazy with words, right? I was listening to Rev D's service on Friday, and she made the very valid point that we use words like we're sitting in a building, right? But there was a process of building that created the building. And so we use the same word to mean a lot of different things. When we're communicating with each other or about ourselves, do we take the time to be clear about what we're actually communicating? Rarely. We just leave it to assumption. Okay? And I submit to you that if you want to be understood, perhaps take the time to be clear. Even to say, and when I use this word, what I actually mean is, it'll take a little longer, but you'll spend more time with each other. Not a bad thing. So we have this human being who is the villain, who becomes the victim of his villains. Right? But he starts off as the villain because he is threatening the social constructs by doing what? Living a life of inclusion. Jesus lived a life of radical inclusivity. He didn't care what you did or who you were. He was going to hang out with you, and he was going to uplift you, and he was going to see your brilliance, and he was going to be a part of leveraging that so that the whole of society was better. Can't have that. Right? So he became the villain. Post-trial, now he's the victim. And he's going to be crucified for what he did. And so, where have you been crucified? Where have you stepped out of the societal comfort zone or the family comfort zone or the work comfort zone or even, dare I say out loud, the comfort zone of your own mind, your own rules, your own social mores? Where have you stepped outside that comfort zone and made yourself the victim? Made someone else your villain in order to justify your victimhood? Where have you crucified your creative authority? Where have you crucified your agency as an intentional, purposeful, divine idea in the mind of God so that you don't have to be that? Because that's the easy way out. To where when the ideas of sitting with someone who you shouldn't, according to page 97 of the Shouldapedia rolling around in your head. Right? And how do you resurrect? Our talk title for today, I don't even remember what it is at the moment. Recognize, release, and resurrect. Part of that is reveal. Thank you, Juanita. Reveal, release, resurrect. So the first thing we have to do is get honest with ourselves. We've got to reveal whatever it is that we've been lying to ourselves about. We've got to do some exploration. And for some of us, that's an archaeological dig. Let's just be honest. Some of us have stuff buried so deep, we need machinery to get in there and help dig that stuff out. Do it. You're worth it. You're not going to do it for anybody else. Do it for you. Right? So I want to jump to the whole resurrection piece. In order to resurrect, the stone had to be rolled away. First, it had to be noticed. It had to be revealed. Then it could be removed. Then there can be a resurrection. So identify. What are you hiding behind? What is your stone? And how do you roll it away? Maybe you need some help rolling it away. Hire a practitioner. Hire somebody. Sit with a friend. Be vulnerable. If you want, and know that you are stronger than you think you are. Because a lot of times those things that need to be moved out of the way feel like an enormous stone that we're never going to be able to move. Yes, you can. That's what the Bible talks about when it says we will move mountains. It's not talking about the literal mountain. It's talking about those things in our consciousness that we have made so big, so unmanageable. Right? How many of us, when we're trying to live a life of inclusion, look out at society and see things going backwards and just throw up our hands and it's like it's never going to happen? Yes, it is. It is happening. Don't get lost in the appearance. I'll front myself off. There was a time when I actually would say, looking at same-gender loving marriage, that it's never going to happen in my lifetime. Thank God I was wrong. Thank God I was wrong. Because we have it. So what if we allow ourselves to imagine that it can happen, to imagine that it is happening, and we don't have to see it in form to validate that. We have to know it in consciousness. Then we're part of the creative process. We're always part of the creative process. We're either creating what we don't want or what we do want. And if we're focused on what's not going to happen, guess what your participation is? Right? The resurrection is an act of forgiveness. The resurrection began on the cross. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. Had those words not been spoken, I can't even conceive that there would have been a resurrection, because there would have been a complete surrender to victimhood, because Jesus would have left them as his villains. And Jesus would have been buried a victim, and there would have been zero motivation to arise. Forgiveness is the peace that I've rarely heard talked about on Easter. Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. He didn't say, I forgive them. He's a human being hanging on a cross. His Christ consciousness has the capacity to forgive. His beat up, brutalized, dying human body, not so much. And we have to understand that our capacity to forgive is a spiritual capacity. It is a spiritual authority based on the agency of who we are. Forgive them. Something, even if you have to, I'm willing to be willing to be willing to be willing to forgive. Start where you are. Right? And just speak the words. Start where you are. We tell folks that in 12-step all the time. Well, are you willing to be willing to be willing? Start where you are. Because here's the thing. The very last words that Jesus actually spoke on the cross, and I'm going to end with this, was not, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? That is a mistranslation. What he actually said in the Aramaic, for this I came. For this I came. Now, this that I believe he's talking about is the whole experience of humanity. The whole experience. For this I came. How many times do we encounter stuff? I ain't signed up for this. Anybody else have it? March 20th, when they shut us all down, I didn't sign up for this, was the first thing out of my ministerial mouth. And the very next thought was, well, apparently you did, because here you are. See, if we understand that we are life unfolding itself in, through, and as us, there was nothing to sign up for. And every messy moment matters. Every messy moment matters. Every ouch is a hallelujah waiting to be recognized. For this, you came. The journey of being human. The journey of resurrecting a consciousness that knows who you are, that knows who you have always been. And so the stone that we get to roll away is all of the garbage that we've put, that we've covered up our consciousness with. And we get to resurrect. Call it Christ consciousness, call it one mind. I don't care what you call it, just resurrect it. Just resurrect it. It's not dead. You're not bringing it back to life. You're uncovering it and resurrecting it. Let's take this into prayer. And so with this breath, I recognize it is the breath of life breathing itself as all life. Created out of it, by it, to be it. I know that I am it. Intentional, purposeful, one of a kind, never to be repeated. Smile in the heart of infinity itself. Expressing, experiencing, constantly unfolding itself as this thing I call my life. And just as certain as I know that, I am certain that what is true of me is true of all life. And so each and every breathing being, a divine idea in the mind of God itself. Every stone, every grain of sand, every raindrop, every energy that holds it all together, all part of this infinite beingness that I call life. So I speak my word, claiming and affirming that a resurrection has been happening and is continuing to happening and is happening in this moment. That the Christ consciousness, the one mind, the truth of all being is resurrecting itself in, through, and as the awareness and life of every individual. That I no longer get stuck in the appearance. That I stop assigning identities based on identifiers. That I see beyond condition to the truth of being in every exchange. And I lift up and I help roll away those common stones. And we rise together because there is one consciousness resurrecting itself in multiplicity as us. I say yes, yes, yes. And so from this yes, I speak a word of gratitude. A word of gratitude knowing that the word spoken is the word fulfilled. There is no waiting period. It is done. And so I receive that. I claim that. I celebrate that. And I release, knowing it's already done. There's nothing to hold on to. And so I let it go. I let it be. And I invite you to join me making this your own as we say together. And so it is.